You're back for more. You must really like these videos or be really scared for the final. You know, both is fair. Both is fair. I mean, I'm a delight most of the time. So the third step here is the who, the O in Eden, okay? So the who is whose law is at play here. Is it two states going against each other, or is it the federal law versus a state's law? If it is two states going against each other, that is a horizontal law issue, and that actually doesn't require much analysis at this stage. All you have to do is identify that there is, in fact, two state laws, and they are not the same. So that just requires you to identify what law this state of Virginia has and what law the state of Massachusetts has. And then probably say something along the lines of this is a horizontal law inquiry and their laws are different, they conflict, therefore we'll have to continue with the analysis to determine whose law is going to apply. Very simple, doesn't have to be that hard, okay? Now, if it is a vertical law inquiry, buckle your seatbelts, okay? Because that means it's federal law versus state law, and there's actually three mini steps, if you will. I put them as, I don't know if you can see it right here, I put A, horizontal, or B, vertical, and I have B, 1, 2, and 3. So B1 is, okay, ask yourself, is this substantive law? What is substantive law? Substantive law is, at its most simplest, how I think of it, is the teeth of a claim. The teeth of a law. If a law is specifically regarding the legal rights of an individual, the responsibilities of an individual to another person, anything like that, then it's a substantive law. So an easy way to think of substantive law is it legal to hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat that's doing nothing, minding their own business, walking down the street that you don't know? No. It's assault and battery depending on what state you're in. If you're, depending on the state you're in, that's just assault. Sometimes it's just battery. Different laws. So, let's say that you do hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat. That's against the law, because it's against the law to harm another individual. And it's also against the law for individuals to just go out and hurt whoever they want, because the state is probably trying to protect the individuals who live in their state from aggressive attacks from strangers, right? So it's really that simple. So the teeth of the claim is if somebody does hit you over the head with a baseball bat and you sue them, what is going to be the nail in the coffin for them? Or what's going to be the thing that grabs them and grabs their credibility, grabs their good name, and drags them through the assault and battery muck of court? It's going to be the fact they broke the law regarding your right as an individual to be safe, and it broke the law of the state saying that they are not to harm other people because they would like to protect their individuals from random assault and battery issues of strangers. So the thing that grabs that defendant was the substantive law, because that's what was protecting that plaintiff. That was what was protecting other people. Same thing in a tort. Any tort is like that. It's against the law to drive through a red light. Why? Because you have to follow the rules of the road. Why? Because of the safety of other people. Why? Because we don't want the people of our state to be harmed because of people that fail to follow the traffic signals. See, so if you break down the law, you can see, okay, at the end of the day, it is substantive. And sometimes with this type of inquiry, you have to kind of break it down as far as you can to try to figure out, okay, again, what's the heart of this law? Is the heart to protect the legal rights and responsibilities of others or those within a state. Any type of protection of an individual or their personal rights is almost always going to be a substantive law, right? Now, procedural law is a little different. Procedural law is the law that usually governs a court and their proceedings. So, for example, you can sue somebody for assault and battery, let's say, in Louisiana for up to 3 years after it happened. I don't know that. I haven't checked. I'm just saying. So I could be wrong. Let's just say the statute of limitations in Louisiana is 3 years. That would be an example of a procedural issue. Technically, that's the Louisiana's actual law, but it's still a procedural law. So let's just say that somebody in Florida drives to Louisiana and hits them over the head with a baseball bat, and that person from Louisiana sues in federal district court because of, diversity, and they sue for $100,000. Okay, so let's say the statute of limitations, the federal statute of limitations for assault and battery is 2 years, and this person sues within a year, but the statute of limitations of Louisiana is 1 year. What's going to happen here? Well, one of two things depending on the next inquiry, actually. Technically, that's a procedural issue. Most procedural issues are actually going to be a federal implication, and federal law will apply. So most procedural things that are federal are going to be what govern in certain diversity cases. So for example, in what we just went over, the substantive law of the assault is going to be the Louisiana law because that's where it happened. So we're going to apply Louisiana law, the state law. But we're probably going to apply the procedural law of the federal government regarding the statute of limitations unless it breaks Erie. Now what does Erie say? Erie says if we are trying to get into federal court, not just solely for diversity, but for forum shopping to make our claim better, to make our result better, then we're going to apply state law all the way. If there is no issue with Erie, in fairness, what the court usually does is they apply the state substantive law and they'll apply the federal procedural law. But for something like statute of limitations, they might not do that because they might say, well, the only reason you sued in federal court was because you knew that it was too late. Now, what if there's an issue about an evidence question, evidence admissibility? That has to do with court. That has to do with court proceedings. Anytime we have a court proceeding that is going on, and something has to do with what is happening in court, or what will be said in court, or what is allowed on the record, anything that comes from court, anything that gets submitted through as a motion to court, think of anything to do with the court in that way, that's procedural. So if you're procedural, then you're most likely going to have more of a federal issue than a state issue, because most federal issues that are thrown in fact patterns have to do with the procedure. And you're probably wondering, why does this matter? Because if it's a procedural problem, then we're going to go with federal law. If it's a substantive issue, we're going to go with state law. This has to do with what law we are going to essentially be applying. That's why it's so important. So what's the teeth of the law that's coming into play? The teeth of law coming into play is the state law. Okay, if that's the only issue that we have, and there's nothing about court admissibility, court filings, court proceedings, court policies, then it's state law that we're going to apply because it's substantive. If, on the other hand, we have issues regarding evidence admission or a legal proceeding, it's going to be federal law that's going to be applied because that's the problem. So then we're going to apply federal law and continue from there. Now, remember, if you have an issue or you're like a fact pattern that has both, then in all fairness, they'll apply the procedural federal law and the state substantive law because they want to discourage forum shopping because that's what Erie's about, but at the same time, they want to encourage justice, and so they feel like if they do that, they have some level of balance with the state interest versus the federal jurisdiction power that they might potentially have over a case. So that's the who. How do we know if it's a horizontal or a vertical issue? If it's between states or between states and federal? Remember, substantive law, the teeth of the claim, procedural law, how we're getting this claim to court and through court. Based on that, you may have forum shopping exception, which kicks it back to state court, or if there's no Erie issue because we're not trying to get something in based on diversity, but really it's because we're trying to shop for a better result, then you're gonna have some issues, right? So Erie, I totally forgot to give a brief over this. So Erie, remember, is just when people try to abuse the system to try to get a better outcome for themselves, and the courts caught on to this, and they said, you can't just go and shop the forum where you're going to file a lawsuit based on what's going to be best for you, because that's not fair to them. And the reason it's not fair to them is because somebody who lives in a specific state would expect to be sued in maybe this state court. If they go to another state and they commit a tort or an injury or something to somebody else, they would expect to be sued with that person, but would they expect to be taken to federal court Not really. Most people don't assume that. So Erie is kind of trying to say that we don't want things to be unfair, because if you can't expect to sue somewhere, or you don't expect that to happen, you're not going to be as prepared. And we really, constitutionally speaking, we really want to make sure people have the chance to, go to court and litigate and protect themselves. And so that's why Erie can come up. So if you do have an issue where you think forum shopping is a problem, you still have to go through these three just to say, it's not substantive law, here's why. Potentially it's procedural law, here's why. But even if it's not substantive law at all and it is procedural, we typically would do federal law because this person is clearly forum shopping, reasons X, Y, and Z. We're going to kick it back to state court anyway. So that's kind of how that would be done. I think I went too much in depth with this one, but hopefully this will help.